Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews Saturday Conversation Show, an interview series where I talk to entertainment personalities, content creators, and filmmakers about their work and love of film. Today's guest is David Weiner, content producer, award-winning journalist, and acclaimed documentary filmmaker whose work on the In Search of documentaries has set the standard for long-form deep dives into genre cinema. The latest film in the film series, In Search of Darkness 1995-1999, will be available for pre-sale on May 15. You can go to 90shorrordoc.com. That's 90shorrordoc.com to get all the information there regarding the pre-sale. I'll have the link in my show notes as well. And I highly recommend people do get their hands on 95.99 because I have seen 1994. I had the pleasure of seeing it late last year, early this year. The great Robin Block from Creative VC provided me with a screener for that. And I'm a big fan of your work, David. I spoke to you previously for In Search of Darkness 1 and 2 way back in the day. I loved number 3 as well, In Search of Tomorrow, all the stuff that you're doing. And it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you today. How are you?
Yeah, pleasure to talk to you, Matt. And time flies, right? Now we're in part two of the 90s. And if you asked me then when we were talking about part one and part two, if I would be doing the 90s and actually in two different parts, I'd be like, what are you talking about? But it's actually been quite an exciting journey. And I've been able to expand it in a different way than we did with our previous movies, where we take on the entire decade at once. Now we get to divide it, obviously, based on the titles, in two separate sections. And it's really given me a bigger opportunity to do a more versatile deep dive into this decade that I think a lot of people kind of overlook up until the Scream era. So I get to sort of focus on the first ones, the gravy, so to speak.
What I love about the 90s horror as well is that there's so many lost gems in that decade that people kind of forget about, especially that, when I was watching 1994, I always, whenever I watch a documentaries, I always make a list of films to watch afterwards. And my list was heavy because there's so many films that kind of went by me. It's like, oh God, I need to check those out, I need to check that out and that one as well. What's interesting though, but like I was born in 81, but the 90s was such a pivotal time for me because, I was a teenager and you get your access to a lot of films and such. And by the end of that decade as well, post Scream was very horror was becoming mainstream again in a certain way. But it's called the lost decade for a reason because there's so many great gems there that we kind of forget about. And I know for myself, just watching your documentary brings back a lot of memories. But memories is something I want to start off in regards to you, David. I was doing some deep dive research into your life, your career. Something that came up in that is a cinema that you used to go to. This the Scarsdale Plaza was a cinema you went to when you were a kid, which is your like your local cinema. You went to different cinemas, of course. There was like more kind of like fancy cinemas around, but this was like your local kind of hangout and you went to. And I also read that was it The Black Hole, 1979, December? Was that kind of
Uh-huh.
like the first kind of like movie film experience you had at the cinema? Is that correct in my research?
Well, that's not correct in terms of the black hole. I'm one of those folks who champions the black hole, but it most definitely was not my first experience. I was born in '68. I was a
Mm.
'70s kid and an '80s teen, and a '90s starting my career in the film industry guy. So that's a three-decade look at snapshot of sort of my, growing up adolescence, and then getting started in my career. But yeah, Scarsdale Plaza, just being able to say it, on your podcast, it just makes me happy. It brings me joy because my absolute foundation was at this local theater, which was really the theater that when the movies would be make the distribution rounds, before they disappeared, and this is of course before VHS was a big thing, it hit Scarsdale Plaza and then it was gone. And then you
Mm.
had to wait and hope it would be on TV. You may or may not have caught it, but in your mind at that age during those times, the late '70s for me and the early '80s, again, before VHS really, before everyone had a VHS player, or even before cable, people got their cable boxes. This is about the time that stuff was happening. The wheel had just been invented and fire couple of years before. It feels ancient right now, but ultimately Scarsdale Plaza was the last stop, and every movie was 99 cents, and there was a new movie every week. And between Scarsdale Plaza and watching so many amazing movies week after week after week with my friends, with my parents, sometimes going by myself, it's kind of like my such a foundation because I mean I can go again and again. It was really inexpensive. I also want to throw a little love towards television because when I think of my film school education before I actually went to film school, I used to watch these chopped up movies on a thing called the 4:30 movie, which
Mm.
was every afternoon, Monday through Friday. So I'd come home and after school, I didn't always watch the 4:30 movie, but they would have, and you'd read this in the TV guide. Oh, it's going to be Monster Week. It's going to be Godzilla Week. It's going to be Planet of the Apes Week. It's going to be, Edgar Allan Poe Week with Vincent Price movies. And I used to watch all of those, and that's where I discovered a massive variety of films that had come before I ever showed up. And even though they were chopped up to bits, I could watch Journey to the Center of the Earth, over 2 nights, or Fantastic Voyage, or Soylent Green and the Omega Man, all the Planet of the Apes movies. I won't go become a listicle, but these movies to me were got me fascinated in storytelling and escapism and adventure. And without further ado, I can't even tell you what my first movie that I ever saw in the theater was because I saw parents would take me to see Monty Python and the Holy Grail and Jabberwocky. I had someone take me to see Aguirre, The Wrath of God when I was way too young to see that.
Was
Um,
Star
and
Trek the motion picture amongst one of the first that you saw
yeah,
in this
Star
as
Trek
well?
was in 1979, but everything, Black Hole and Star Trek, time after time, all those things, I was like a regular moviegoer by then. Star Wars, of course, 77
Mm.
is the pivotal movie in my world that changed my perception of being a movie audience and loving movies and loving stories to all of a sudden saying, wait a minute, how did they do that? I need to discover how to become a filmmaker because I want to make people feel as happy as I was walking out of this. I want to try and do the same thing.
It's interesting. So I have a 12-year-old turning 13, and he, over the last year, has fallen deep in love with kaiju films, Japanese, kaiju, Toho, all that stuff. He's now to the point where he's pretty much seen everything. He's now making his own stop motion movies. We got him some stop motion software for Christmas. His uncles did, and he's making his own stop motion puppets and making his own films and such. And what I love about it is that, and what I think he keyed into with those movies is that there's a um more tangible aspect when you watch those kind of classic kind of movies. And when you read about the making of them, the resources were harder to come by for the filmmakers and such, but you can see the brick and mortar kind of the process of it much more clearly than say today with like all the rendering and CG and stuff that a lot of films have today. And just really interesting listening, just reading up on yourself that some of the movies that you love to watch and you list a bunch of them, the Universal monster stuff from like the 30s and such, which again, when you look back on it, the bricks and mortar kind of filmmaking you see there, and it sets the standard. To me, I still think at a high standard of those characters, Frankenstein, Dracula, and such since then. When you look back at it, and you're watching those films, and especially let's put the Universal horror movies in context here. As you're seeing these films on screen, do you think is that when you start thinking to yourself, I wonder how they did that? I wonder how they did this. And if so, how do you go about kind of researching how to go about things? My son these days can look up a YouTube tutorial and see stuff like that. How does a young kind of David Weiner kind of look at back in the day, say, I wonder how they did that? Is it library? Is there documentaries access to? I mean, how did you go
Yeah.
about first diving into the go peeking into Oz behind the curtain for these movies?
Well, the wonderful stuff about my childhood is, first of all, my parents. begrudgingly let me watch a lot of television.
Mm.
At a certain point, they kind of cut me off, or they didn't cut me off, but they really made me choose in like a 2 hour window on a Saturday of between cartoons and, monster movies and that kind of stuff. But I watched so much of that stuff on TV. I recall, and so I wanted to say, a couple things that you mentioned before I even answer the question about how do I research how did I research this stuff, is that the tangible element that your son, stop motion, he loves he likes to do his own stop motion with the kaiju movies and stuff like that. I loved Godzilla, Gamera, every Yungari monster from the deep,
Mm.
the X. I'm gonna get the name wrong, but that buggy-eyed X,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the outer X from outer space monster, Gorgo, if it was, whether it was the marquee guys like King Kong, Godzilla, or the sub monsters, I saw it all. I wanted them to battle each other. I love that stuff, and it is very tangible. And I liken it to also like stop motion with Ray Harryhausen.
Mm.
Ray Harryhausen was before my time. I mean, he kind of went through, and the last movie he did was Clash of the Titans in '82. But it was to me, it was just a style of filmmaking that still was really wonderful, where you got to see these creatures that you had actual empathy for. Um, and I was definitely one of those kids who, after I saw Star Wars, I raced out. I begged my mom and dad to use their Super 8 cameras that we used for home movies to get all my friends on the block and make a movie, make us my Star Wars movie, Star Wars 2, that, it wasn't worthy of wrapping fish, but it's an indelible memory that I'll never forget. But
Mm.
at the time when I started getting more and more interesting, like I would look at these Hammer horror films, the Universal horror films. I remember of all those monsters, I love them all. Uh, but I remember thinking to myself, as I became a little more in tune with what's going on there, well, Boris Karloff's got makeup. It's clearly a
Mm.
guy with makeup. Bela Lugosi, he's got a great costume, but but the Wolfman, even that, it's a wolf man, and it's really great makeup. But I knew there was a guy under there. But I was like, whoa, the creature from the Black Lagoon. That was my favorite because it looked like an actual monster. And I could not see the zippers. I could not see the seams. I couldn't see the makeup, where it would connect. And so I would be that much more fascinated and frightened and obsessed with a character like that, because I started thinking about costumes, and I started thinking about who are the people who make this. And of course, I would go, when I was in the library, I'd go straight to the film section as a kid. And I went straight to the library. Like you mentioned, it's very true. They had these books called the Crestwood books, and they each would focus on different monsters. So you can get the Godzilla book, you can get the King Kong book, the Dracula book. And I poured through those pages. Sometimes I even read it, but I would just want to look at the pictures and study them. And then, of course, Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine came along. I saw that on the shelf where the first issue I ever saw had the Cyclops from Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And I had just recently seen Seventh Voyage of Sinbad on the big screen at a revival screening that my mom took me to. And all of a sudden I was like, this is a magazine that speaks to me, and I can now read it and learn all about how this stuff was made. So I've always been a curious person who, I don't take it all at face value. At a certain point, I evolved to an interested person who wanted to go down the rabbit hole to find out how this stuff was made, to the point where sometimes I'd be a bit of a completist to my own chagrin. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you here. We lost the sound
Can you hear me now?
from you. Now I can, yes, go for it.
Great. Sorry about that. Going down that rabbit hole, you went through like, films, you did film school, you did with college, all that stuff. But when you, after college, one of the first jobs you had was working with full moon features. And I've talked to a lot of people about like post kind of like film school or post-college kind of careers, usually starting off, assistants and such, or working behind the scenes such. Sometimes the names will come up, like um, what's the name I'm looking for here? Why am I blanking out here? Um, Roger Corman, for example, will be a name that come up quite a bit, and like the experiences people have like on those sets. And much beloved experiences as well, kind of like because you have hands on deck kind of stuff. Everyone working together, making indie films, kind of like very much community driven kind of filmmaking. I imagine working with Full Moon with someone like Charles Band will have that kind of same kind of uh, process as well. We're talking about B movie features, but beloved B movie features to the point where even today, like when I was watching, I was saying before, when I watched 1994, the In Search of Darkness, or some full moon features in there. So I was watching films like things like Meridian and Subspecies and such films that I kind of knew of when I was younger, but never got a chance to really watch them. And I got to rewatch them now because they're available on Tubi and other places as well. What's that process? What was that process like for you to be able to learn the things that you know, but then actually be able to apply them in a practical sense behind the scenes, working for a company like Full Moon, who they're in your wheelhouse of what you're interested in regards to genre and characters and such. But now you're on a film set, you're working in these different jobs, starting off from the bottom. Of course, everyone starts off from the bottom, but I'm sure starting off from the bottom and learning all those kind of the tricks behind in the trade, and everything else would have been just a really kind of thrilling exercise for you, not only as a film fan, but someone who clearly is craving the knowledge and the experience and everything else, and wanting to know not only like how the stuff works, how to make it work, but how to make it work in the context of an industry as well, because people tend to forget it's not just about make believe, but it's a business at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, it's my goal. I went to film school because I wanted to make movies. I wanted to direct movies. I wanted to write movies. And I graduated and headed my car out west and went straight to Hollywood. I had actually been there for a summer 2 years prior. Between my sophomore and my junior year, I had an internship at the Walt Disney Studios. And it wasn't in film production. It was a thing called production resources, which was essentially product placement
Mm,
in movies. And so I learned a lot more about just sort of the marketing of films and ways that you could sell a film and compensate, recoup some of the budget just by doing that. So I knew for a fact I wanted to come out to Los Angeles and Hollywood, and my first dream was to get on a movie set and run around with a headset and a walkie-talkie and yell rolling and cut and be an important part of just the crew. And having made my own student films, many of those, this is the real deal. So you get to see the professionals at work. And being on a movie set, especially as a runner or a production assistant, whatever you want to call it, that's how you want to start because you get a bird's eye view of what everyone does on the set. And I remember the first movie I ever worked on was this movie called Round Numbers,
mhm.
starring Kate Mulgrew before she was really famous as Janeway in Voyager. And she was really nice to me. I was like her teacher's pet. But I remember working on that film, which was a very low budget film, and people said to me, David, you need to pay attention. This is not how you make a movie.
Mm,
Because these were professionals who were just really disappointed in how low budget it was and, cutting corners and the way they were doing that. But that's all I knew, and then I quickly moved on to Full Moon Entertainment as as a runner essentially at first. And then I, jumped on a bunch of their films in different capacities. And location, I was an assistant locations on one, but getting to be like a second unit, first assistant director and or production manager. Sometimes it would be combined doing stuff like that. I never would have had a chance to do that on a bigger production as a young and relatively green person. But, it's a low budget, small independent thing. They want to give people the opportunity. They also don't want to pay you very much. But
mm,
when you're starting out and you're hungry for knowledge, you're hungry for experience, you take all these opportunities and you learn fast and the hard way. how things are done, and money is something that's really not an important thing to you at that point. So to ultimately get a good perspective on the film set and decide what everyone does. Do I want to be a grip? Do I want to be a assistant director, an AD? Do I want to be in the camera department? Do I want to just be craft service because it's too crazy and complicated and I like to eat? There's a million things that you could do on a set, but having an idea of not only what all the different departments do, but also understanding what it takes when certain people are working their ass off, other people are waiting around. And then as soon as things are ready, it flips and everyone's working in front of the camera, and the people who are running around like crazy getting the next shot set up, they're the ones standing around. There's lots of interesting dynamics in terms of the structure of the work and the politics on set that you really absorb. And so the older you get, all you can think of is like, well, if I want to make my movie, if I want to do my own thing, I really need to know how things work on a movie set. So not only can I help, learn to sort of navigate that landscape, but I also need to know that if I'm the top guy or up there at the top running my own movie, I need to understand the perspective of everyone who has taken the time to work for me and what they're thinking and how they're doing their job, and when to tell them what to do and when to stand aside because they know better than you. And they usually do know better than you because they're pros and experienced. And B, most people on a film set think that they know more than the directors and the producers anyway.
Mm.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms I could talk about. But working on these low budget full moon entertainment movies were like a part of me being a film snob kind of disdained the fact that they were low budget movies that weren't using Jurassic Park effects, and which was about to come, but all these practical effects that just you could tell that they didn't have a lot of money, but you could also see they were incredibly resourceful. This reminded me of the movies I loved and ate up as a kid. And I really was a kid in the candy store because I usually had some elevated position where I could really soak up more in terms of wanting to do it myself one day.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. I want to move on to a game I like to play with my guests. It's called Choose Between Two. Essentially, I'm going to give you a choice between two different things, and you're going to choose one and elaborate on your choice. Are you ready to play?
I must say that this is a cruel game, but I just want to say that.
Well, I like horror films. I like to torture people. What can I say? All right. First one, Dracula or Frankenstein?
Are we talking about Universal?
Just as a character overall.
Um, So you've already stumped me. You've already stumped me. I mean, I think your question is ultimately to sort of clarify why one is better than the other.
Or why would you have a preference to one over the other, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say when I was younger, absolutely Frankenstein, because he was more of a unpredictable monster and a brute. And Dracula to me, while was a vampire, which can be scary, he was more erudite. He was more sophisticated. He was more noble, and he was more romantic. So that didn't interest me so much when I was a kid, especially when it wasn't so bloody. But once vampires in general sort of showed to me that sex and blood was the meat and potatoes of the average vampire movie, I became, especially with Christopher Lee, much more interested. And I would say 1979's Dracula by John Badham, that starred Frank Langella, I would say that's probably where things turned for me between one, being much more interested in Frankenstein's monster, because I saw Frank Langella on Broadway
Mm.
in Edward Gorey's Dracula, which was Edward Gorey sets and Dracula with a tongue-in-cheek sensibility. And so when John Badham did it, he did it a straight adaptation. He just wanted to do his version, and I loved it beginning to end. I saw that at Scarsdale Plaza. It was the first rated R movie I ever got to see.
And for what I understand of that film, not to go far into the weeds, but you were kind of begging to see Alien and you couldn't get the session in.
Yeah.
So that was the alternate option, right?
Oh my God, that was I didn't well, here's the thing. The brief recap of that is that with Scarsdale Plaza, because there was a new movie every week, Alien showed up, and I was 11 years old, and
Mm.
I wanted to see it so badly, and my mom said, "No, David, you're going to have nightmares." And I was like, "No, I've got the novelization, I've got the photo book, I've got the comic. I know everything about it. I know everything that happens. I won't be scared. I just really want to see it. I can't wait to see it." No, no, you can't see it. And
Mm.
then so Alien came and went. And then about a week and a half later, my dad said, "So, David, did you want to see that Alien movie?" And of course, it was gone. And it
Mm.
wasn't playing anywhere else because last stop before Disappearsville was Scarsdale Plaza. But the wonderful consolation prize was the fact that John Bradham's Dracula was playing there. And so I got to bond with my dad, and he took me to go see it. He trusted that I could see my first rated R movie with no big deal, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing, and I would have to eventually see Alien on VHS.
Next one. Wes Craven or John Carpenter?
John Carpenter versus Wes Craven is a real tough one, but I Halloween is such an incredible uh, Halloween changed my world in that I went from monster movies to horror movies, transitioning using that film. I had seen like The Exorcist, I'd seen The Omen, Amityville Horror on television,
Mm.
and they scared the crap out of me. And those were clearly horror versus monster movies. But they were the movies that I wanted to see because they were popular, and I needed to know why they were popular, and they scared me. Whereas Halloween, again, I saw that only on TV the first time I ever saw it. Um, for some reason, it changed my mindset where I wanted to learn how to face my fears. Why did this scare the crap out of me? How did John Carpenter put this together? Was the music or the editing or just the storytelling? Something about it intrigued me where instead of saying, "I'll never watch that again because it scared the crap out of me," I kept on coming back to it. And I didn't know this consciously at the time, but I was deconstructing this film to understand why it was scary and how John Carpenter did his magic. And so I'll just cut to Wes Craven. My appreciation for Wes Craven came much later when I started to realize I enjoyed the Nightmare on Elm Street films, but I wasn't as obsessed with. I felt at that point, it felt like filmmakers were saying, well, we need an icon like Jason or Michael Myers. Freddy came really early, but Freddy, by the time he showed up, I'm like, oh, they're trying to, there's something's happening here. They're
Mm.
trying to create these characters for multiple returns, obviously good box office, but repetition and sequels, Hellraiser, Chucky, all that kind of stuff like that. So this is just my cynical young mindset thinking, well, you're not going to get me. I'm not
Mm.
scared and I know what you're doing. It was only once I got over myself and started paying attention to the movies themselves as information and entertainment did I start really realizing how wonderfully intelligent and subversive Wes Craven was as a horror director.
I have a feeling I know where you're going to go with the next one. I'm going to ask anyway. Physical media or streaming?
Both. Physical media, I love the tangible, everything from looking for it in the video store on, when those things existed
Mm.
to now having it, I have so much. It's a portion is in my sort of reach for version, and then I have all this other stuff in the garage, basically. But the fact that you can have an instant gratification or find a movie, or even like you mentioned, Tubi. Oftentimes when I'm doing the In Search of Darkness movies, I'll be like, gosh, what was that one scene and then one thing? Rather than having to buy it or search for it if it's not readily available by physical media, I could go on Tubi and I know exactly where I could scrub it, find it, get that one line that I need. Was that, you know, two knives or was it a pitchfork? Gosh, what was it? I could check it, and I use it for reference. But the sad thing about the instant gratification of streaming is that I learned the hard way very early on, especially with Netflix. I thought, well, that's my online video store. And I quickly realized that with licenses, things cycle out and they disappear or they go to another channel or they're impossible to find. And I found it out the hard way because I had sold some of my physical media thinking, oh, well, I can make some space for myself. Because I had a lot of stuff. And especially when I worked for Entertainment Tonight and when I worked for Famous Monsters, I got a lot of stuff from the studios. I was very lucky, but I got so much stuff where I was just like, I don't know, I don't have enough room in my house for this stuff. So long and short of it is, I really do value and love physical media. But if you're someone like me who has so much, I don't have a room I can devote it to. So I literally come to the fundamental space problems for it. So I really do like the instant gratification of streaming. But I have to tell you, it's impossible to decide on something if I don't know what I want to watch because I
Yeah,
scroll like everyone else. 20, 30, 40 minutes has gone by. I'll pick out a couple things, but I'll forget that I was wanted to even see it because I'm like, well, that's good, but let's see what else there is. And then I finally come back to that one thing that I wanted to watch, or I'll go to my physical media. So it's kind of an odd phenomenon in terms of trying to find something new.
it is. It definitely is. Last one. You're in the cinema, you're in a theater, you sit down, want to watch a movie, watch the movie. What's your go-to snack? Popcorn or candy?
Popcorn. I used to be a candy kid. At Scarsdale Plaza, I'd get the snow caps, I'd get the sweet tarts, but then my teeth felt like they were going to rot out by the end of the movie. Milk Duds. I watched during the Blues Brothers, and I laughed so hard I almost swallowed one. I couldn't breathe. No, Milk Duds tried to kill me during the Blues
Mm,
Brothers. And so I just kind of, and as I hit adolescence, the more candy I had, the more spots I had on my face. And so I've been ever since a popcorn person through and through. And boy, I can't not have popcorn when I sit and watch a movie.
I want to talk a little bit about your time as a film journalist and editor because this is something that's really interesting to me. Because when I started doing my stuff in 2006. It'll be 20 years next year. And I was writing for print publications when they were, more available. And slowly those things phased out as social media came in, digital became more paramount. And then I work exclusively for online stuff, and now I just do my own thing. You yourself, have worked for like quite a number of different publications, but through different technological phases throughout this. So with magazines, you did stuff with film. What was the movie called? Film Monsters. In Filmland, was it
Famous
the
Monsters, yeah.
Famous Monsters? Yeah, you were editor there. You did stuff with Lightspeed Media and Entertainment Asylum, doing like the .com phase there. Entertainment Tonight, you were there for a long time as well. So like it was like a gamut of stuff there. Um, Looking back on that time in your life when you were writing about films. Um, can you pinpoint a time where you think that maybe it was the best time to really be in film media? My opinion is the most money I ever made was, of course, when it was print because people were buying the magazines and everything else and such thing. And it's something great about going back about physical media and streaming. There's something terrific about receiving the copy of the magazine and opening it up and looking at the pages in my byline there. It's different than seeing it on a screen, right? Because these days anyone can do that. There was almost exclusivity about that. You had to prove yourself to the editor and write the words and get the feedback and everything else. And I love that, and I miss that to a certain extent as well. What about for yourself? When was it for you that you thought in your film journalist career that was kind of like the best time for you and the best time for that industry, especially in regards to covering movies and entertainment?
Well, they didn't align. I did it backwards. I'm so smart that I decided to do print when it was dying. Um, but beggars can't be choosers. For me, I came out to Los Angeles to work in movies and to write movies and direct movies, and my parents were always very, very, very supportive, and I love them forever for that. But they also said, David, you need a plan B. You
Mm.
know, if you don't become, the next Steven Spielberg or George Lucas or Martin Scorsese, whatever you want to be, what are you going to do? How are you going to support yourself? And so, I took that to heart and I just thought, well, I don't even know what plan B is going to be. But what I do know is I need to be working in the entertainment industry to be happy. Because even if I'm not making my own movies, writing about movies, working on movies in some capacity where even if it's not my own movie, that would bring me joy. And so I did not go to journalism school. I mean, I did a lot of creative writing and I did a lot of essay writing, but I did not do any reporting in college. But when the online sort of explosion happened, all of a sudden these entertainment online journalism. I mean, I really hesitated at the time. No offense to anyone who calls writing online journalism because it
Mm.
is. But at the time when it was in my lap and I got to do it, I said, I can't call myself a journalist. Journalists do print. Journalists went to journalism school. Journalists have a tremendous amount of experience versus me writing what I'm interested in, what I researched, what I are reporting on something, and then posting send, and it's published in 2 seconds. I did not recognize that for myself as online journalism until I ended up doing it for for years and years and years and years and years. Um, so the golden age, arguably, was probably the 2000s, and that's when I was with Entertainment Tonight online. I had done a bunch of online entertainment jobs where I was writing for websites, and I wrote for AOL, this thing called Entertainment Asylum, which was AOL's first planting the flag on the internet, because AOL was its own thing that you got on a
Mm.
disc, and it was through a portal that you got your news and entertainment. But AOL's like, well, we got to be on a URL as well. So they created Entertainment Asylum, and I got to be on the ground floor with Lightspeed Media to help shape that and decide what it was, and that was amazing because it was just spitballing what would people like, what would we like to see, and we got to do it. And I got to do pulp movies and cult movies and horror movies, and it was really really fun. But ultimately, as the .com jobs would come and go, and we'd all get downsized because all these internet companies, when we first started out, this is the bubble that everyone talks about. They would spend massive amounts of money to grow their staff and to make headlines, but they did not have a long-term game plan as to how they would finance and
Mm.
and sell. This isn't where everything was advertising just yet. They was just starting out, and they're like, "Oh well, people will click on an ad, and that'll pay for your website." And people realized very quickly, no, no one pays attention, and it's very annoying, and you can't subsidize your entire operation this way. It's got to be another way. So when I end, to keep a long story short, when I ended up at Entertainment Tonight, I didn't even want the job at ET Online because I thought, oh gosh, another online entertainment site, even if it's the top syndicated entertainment show in the world, quote unquote, I'm just going to lose my job in 3 months or 6 months again. But
Mm.
ironically, I ended up being there. I took it because I'm like, well, I should just figure out my next steps while I do this. And as I was writing and doing entertainment reporting, it wasn't reviews. It was, interviews with celebrities and set visits and red carpet and some junket and that kind of stuff. And the stuff that I didn't like, which was a lot of tabloid stuff, a lot of Michael Jackson and you know Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian and that tabloidy stuff. But I got to do lots of really, really cool, fun stuff. So I would say that was the zenith of being able to do ultimately what I want within the confines of what the show wanted. Show would say 2/3 all has to be this stuff. I had about a third of a playground to go to movie sets. Uh, I'd meet Katie Featherston at a junket for Paranormal Activity, and then I'd say, hey, we should do a sit down where you and I just talk about your favorite Halloween movies. I could
Mm.
just do it without having to ask anybody. I could go to Heather Langenkamp and say, oh, the anniversary of Nightmare on Elm Street is coming up. And I saw her somewhere else that wasn't even an Elm Street thing. And I said, would you like to sit down for Entertainment Tonight? And she's like, of course, Entertainment Tonight is easy to get people because it's the top show.
Yeah.
Uh, Long story short, I got a lot of people. It was really a great time for me when I don't think about all the, celebrity deaths and DUIs and arrests and all the stuff that I really just was not palatable to me. But then Famous Monsters came along, and that was my first opportunity to do print writing. And they loved it. I got to do more. Very long story short, I ended up working for them and then being the editor-in-chief for that magazine. And I would say that was probably the pinnacle for me in terms of getting to do what I want, having the autonomy to do it, because it was a very small organization, very small group. And I had all the experience of everything leading up to it, where I knew I'd never been an editor for a magazine before, but it all came naturally to me. Obviously, it was very hard work and it took a lot of learning curve there, but it was very easy to me because I loved the content. I knew how to wrangle and get James Cameron and Mark Hamill and Guillermo del Toro to say, oh yeah, I love Famous Monsters. Sure. I'll sit down and talk with you. So those were good times, but that's when print was just plummeting in terms of sales. And so I ultimately had to leave based on sales of the magazine that were plummeting before I even got there, even though it was winning Rondo Awards and things like that. And as before I started doing the documentaries for Creator VC, I was trying to I got work with the Hollywood Reporter doing, retrospective interviews with people like Ridley Scott, or Ralph Bakshi talking about Alien or, Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. But I was also writing for like LA Weekly, again, print. As that got thinner and thinner and thinner and the distribution got, less and less and less. So, at the end of the day, I got a lot of great experience. I got to have my stuff in print. I got to reach large audiences with the stuff that I was passionate about. And it really prepped me for making documentaries, which I had never made before. But it was like the perfect storm by the time I was asked to work with Robin Block and Creator VC.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. Speaking of which, when we go into like the In Search of Darkness films, and I'll have in the show notes the links to the interviews I did with you for parts 1 and 2 of that series down there, so we don't have to go too far into that. But one thing I don't think I've asked before is like, how did you and Robin meet? Robin from Creator VC kind of meet and get this ball kind of rolling, because he's all the way in the UK. He's doing stuff over there. You're deep embedded in kind of like in the Los Angeles kind of like community entertainment industry in regards to the film writing and such. Was it Famous Monsters? Was that kind of like the end that you had in regards to that job?
No, because I had left Famous Monsters by then. I
Mm.
left Famous Monsters in 2016, and I met Robin mid 2018. And Jessica Dwyer, who was one of the producers on In Search of Darkness, I knew her because she's a horror entertainment journalist. She writes for Horror Hound mainly, but she does other stuff as well. But she and I had crossed paths on the set of The Conjuring 2, which I was covering for Famous Monsters. And when you're sitting around waiting, for the talent to come out and talk with you, you chit chat with the other journalists. And I was like, thinking like the editor in chief of Famous Monsters. I'm like, oh, I could use her she's good. I could use her to write some stuff for me. And so because she wrote some stuff for Famous Monsters, we kept in touch. And then when she started, I don't actually know how she got connected with Robin, but she did first. And one day she reached out to me because she knew I was looking for work. I was doing lots of freelance stuff, but I did not have a gig. And
Mm,
she's just like, well, I know this guy in the UK. He's doing this 80s documentary, 80s horror documentary. Uh, I think you'd be perfect for it. You should talk to him. And so I checked their artwork. I looked at their teaser trailer that they did, and I thought these guys do quality work. This is a very cool idea. I'm sure it will lead to nothing, but by all means, I'll talk to him, not even expecting what would be to come. It is me writing and directing these movies. And I mean, I could tell that story also, but that's how I met him because he saw that I had a background with Famous Monsters and Entertainment Tonight, and I had a proclivity for horror and genre film, and I loved it and passionate about that stuff and loved it. So he put me on a what he called an advisor circle, where he took people like me, put them all together to, start working on this film, but like throwing ideas together and, problem solving and things like that. And I guess, arguably the cream rose to the top, if I, want to call myself that, because I would point out things like, this is great, this is great. Far be it for me to tell you how to do your job, but if I were doing this, I would do this differently this way, that
mm.
differently that way. And I think I got Robin's attention, that I cared and that I had attention to detail. And based on my experience, it ultimately led to him asking me to write and direct it, because the film didn't have a director, didn't have a writer director. He said, we're still working it out, but we're thinking we could just have people do the interviews, and then we'll sort it in the editing room and put something together. And I just said, well, you could do it that way, but I really think you need someone with vision to see it through to the end and to lead everybody and to be very, uh, to keep a very narrow focus as to how this thing can be ultimately completed. Um, I don't think it's going to work so well the other way around. And I think based on that, but I never offered myself up for the job. I said I could write questions. I'm in Los Angeles. I could do interviews for you if you want, whatever you need me to do. But I think he saw, based on my experience and my passion, that I might be the right guy. And I still might be the right guy. I don't know.
Well, I definitely think you were the right guy. I mean, here we are. We got May 15 pre-orders going to be available for In Search of Darkness, 1995, 1999. And people can see that at 90shorrordoc.com. I will have that in the show notes as well. So this will be like the fifth entry in the Search of Darkness series. There's also In Search of
This,
Tomorrow, which I'm a big fan of. And from what I understand, In Search of Legends, like delving into fantasy stuff, is that something that's still on the drawing board as well?
it's not happening, but I don't think it's going to happen. If it does, it'll be way down the road. We're a very small company. We're independent of all the crafts people that we bring on to make these documentaries. Our core group is under 10 people. There's some more because we're expanding with other projects, but fundamentally, there's only so much that we could do. And when we're already doing multiple projects at the same time. Like
Mm,
I am directing In Search of Darkness 95 to 99, but I'm also executive producing The Thing Expanded. And I also
yeah.
executive produced Aliens Expanded before that. And it's wonderful to do. But I also was working on the In Search of Tomorrow book,
Mm,
written by Abby Bernstein, and we did an adaptation of that documentary, and we made this beautiful 300-page book. And so, we have all these other projects in the works that I can't talk about, spinning so many plates. And so the answer to what's up with In Search of Legends, or what's up with In Search of Tomorrow Part Two, is a lot of this is a litmus test that has to be proven by our community and the fan base. Where if we put it out there saying we want to do this, we first gauge the excitement and enthusiasm for it. And if we get to the point where there's a groundswell of we really, really, really want this, like people said that about 90s, people were saying that about In Search of Darkness 70s. Um, but the groundswell would ultimately bring out where we'll start doing surveys, and we'll survey the public, but anyone who's paying attention to us. How badly do you want this? Tell us all the things you'd like to see. What would you do? Would you pay for this if this came out? That kind
mm,
of stuff like that. because it's such a tremendous undertaking to make these documentaries. It takes a long time and a huge amount of resources. And so a great idea, which I'd love, when we brought up In Search of Legends, I'm like, 80s fantasy movies? Are you kidding me? Like Conan the Barbarian, John Milius. It's one of my all-time favorites, Crow, that is between fantasy and sci-fi, that's fun, fun, fun stuff. But fundamentally, it's not feasible if you have if you have several hundred really enthusiastic people, but you don't have thousands
Mm.
saying, do this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's either way, whether it happens or it doesn't. I mean, the work that you guys have done at Creative VC has been incredibly impressive. Just I mean, you listed off so many of the titles there, and again, I really tell people 90shorrordoc.com. Get in there with the pre-order for In Search of Darkness 995, 1999. You'll also find all the other great movies, documentaries that David was talking about just there. Because if you haven't seen these yet, and I really urge people to listen, if you haven't seen any of these documentaries yet, I incredibly urge you to watch them. Whether you buy like a downloadable or the physical media or what have you, it's an experience. It really is. It's a you sit down, you strap yourself in, you go through this ride of checking out these new titles, revisiting classic titles you probably remember when you were a kid. And above all, I think what I love about what you do, David, is you provide us with an education, I think. And you in a it's kind of like almost kind of like a uh time capsule in a sort of way, but like done for this modern audience, and
Yeah.
just the list of guests you have in there, and the movies that you talk about, and the way it goes about with the packaging and everything. I think it's just a really incredible work that you guys do there. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to two things I want to talk about real quick. One, first of all, a weird byproduct of all this is that In Search of Darkness, the various films are now being used for papers, for thesis papers, for film students and students of horror as a genre. Because people come to me and they ask me, for information or for quotes or if they could use it as a reference. So that I never expected, and I'm absolutely touched. And I don't necessarily think that I never made these documentaries for that purpose, but and maybe they're not for everyone in terms of that, because they really are digestible stuff that are very broad in terms of what they cover. But I think for anyone who's passionate about this stuff, whether it's this horror genre itself or sci-fi, but in film and in film language and in film storytelling, I think there's some value there. But I also wanted to make sure to really single out Robin Block. Robin Block, he masterminded all this stuff, and he surrounded himself with really capable people to make it happen. And he's really a creative leader that ultimately, I was talking about when I first came on, he was still feeling out how to best make this project happen, but he had this amazing vision of the end goal. And he was figuring out as he was going along as well. And he'd be the first person to say that. He's very humble and modest about it. He's like, I'm not a great producer. He's like, no, I had this great idea and I wanted to see this. And he was smart enough to really figure out how to best do the crowdfunding, the marketing, the advertising, bringing the right people to do the right job, but most importantly, involving the audience and the community and the fans in the process. Something that I was kind of against at first. I'm like, really? Wait, are we going to edit by committee? And he's like, no, no, no. That's not what people are doing here. And he had to educate me
Mm.
that the community involvement and the fan involvement and their passion, uh, whether it's having your name in the end credits, or now even having a video where you just talk about how much you love a certain movie, or even love the In Search of Darkness series, or just the genre, seeing yourself as part of this, seeing yourself alongside the likes of John Carpenter, or Robert Englund, or any of your horror heroes, it means a lot to people. And that's something that I've learned over the course of time, that these movies are very important to people because it's really part of the fabric of their lives and their upbringing. And while informational and educational and entertaining, the nostalgia value really takes everyone back to that one time that they did saw a movie, whether it was with their a loved one, their mom or dad, their cousin. They had a bootleg tape and they popped it in and they shouldn't have done it, or they wanted to escape from an unfortunate situation where mom and dad were fighting and getting divorced, and you just got to go to the movies and you got to see the American Werewolf in London, and you transported you somewhere else. You know, these movies are a lot more than the movies that we're covering. These movies are about us, and these movies are about our love of cinema, but also the people who we were with and the time that we saw it and who we were when we saw these movies. That's really what these documentaries seem to be capturing in terms of people's connection to them. And that was never the initial intention, but it's something that we're all so happy that people connect that way, because I value that tremendously above all else.
Well, well said there, David. Well said. And congratulations again to you. Can't wait to see 95, 99 when it releases later this year. I thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again. And yeah, whenever, the next project comes up after 95, 99, please let me know. I'd love to always check it out and get your thoughts about it. It'd be great to talk again.
Absolutely. It would be my pleasure to come back. And nice talking to you, Matt. You got great questions because you allow me to revisit my early days in Scarsdale Plaza and watching monster movies. It made me very happy and it really shaped who I am today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.